Hello and welcome back to the MBC Sports Podcast. Andrew Sulliver alongside Connell Scruggs, Andrew Feeney, and JP Eisenhower as we prepare for the Region Championship in Region 6 Quad A high school football as the Marist War Eagles prepare to take on the Stevenson Jaguars this week at Hughes Spalding Stadium for the number one seed in the playoffs. Both these teams enter undefeated, and Marist at 5-0, Stevenson at 4-0. Both teams coming off relatively dominant wins last week. Marist defeating Arabian Mountain 34-0, as Stevenson defeated Mays 15-7. Connell, in that Marist versus Arabian Mountain game, what did you see offensively?
Offensively, I was once again impressed with the rushing attack. I think Marist, that's the bread and butter, and they're executing it extremely well with both Lincoln Parker and Andrew Manley, and not to mention Thomas Royalauer had 2 touchdowns versus Arabian Mountain, one receiving and one rushing. But one thing that's got to improve, I think, coming into this game and in kind of later than the season in the playoffs is the passing game. I think it's got to be a lot more consistent. Been missing a lot of throws, stuff like that. It's just not, when you got to pass it, you don't feel like you can get it if you need to. That's kind of the feeling I have, and I feel like when you go into the playoffs and you're going to play better teams, potentially Jefferson, Bainbridge, those kind of teams, you want to have that passing attack too.
And JP, your thoughts on the quarterback situation is once again we saw Champ Davis and Hayden Richardson rotating, with Richardson getting the start.
Yeah, I think this is something we're going to continue to see throughout the season. I think Champ is a little bit better passer than Hayden is, but I think Hayden is the better runner, and I think Hayden knows the offense just a little bit better. We saw Champ make a mistake on a play call in that game when he turned the wrong way on a handoff, and I think when you look at it, it really is going to come down to Marist seems to be able to pass it when they're ahead of the chains and they don't have to pass it, and it's not a forced passing down. But when they have to pass the ball and they're behind the chains, they just can't seem to be able to complete those passes.
You think we'll continue to see Richardson getting starts and then Champ Davis just coming in no matter what the game score and that sort of thing?
I think we are going to continue to see that, because I think what they're going to continue to do with that is also, when you think about COVID, if one of them were to get COVID, you want them both to be ready to play a full game.
And do you think the coaches have set one of them will be the starter in a big time game, or that it's still up in the air as to who's the main quarterback?
I think right now Hayden is the starting quarterback.
Feeney, defensively, did you like what you saw against Arabian Mountain?
I mean, yeah, I don't think anybody disliked what we saw. Our defense has played great all season, and they continued that against Arabian Mountain. I think the offense definitely needs to step up a little bit. It was 30. They scored 33, but it was pretty sloppy 33. Defense, very, very good. Offense needs a little bit of improvement.
Yeah, defense hasn't allowed a touchdown yet. All season. Only allowed 6 points total.
Yeah, and that field goal came first drive of the game, gave up a 60-yard run against Arabian Mountain. I think that part of that can just be blamed on 5:45 start. I'm not sure the players were quite up and ready to get started with that early time. Came out a little sloppy and gave up a big run, but held their own and inside the red zone, gave up that field goal. So 6 points in 5 games.
That's crazy.
That's pretty decent. As we preview Marist for Stevenson this week, Connell, do you like the matchup if you're the Marist War Eagles?
If you're the Marist War Eagles, this is probably going to be the best run defense that you've seen all year. The run defense for Stevenson has been pretty strong coming into this game. Like Marist, they've allowed very few points per game. And a player I'd look out for in the run game, strong safety Dorian Helm. He's a senior. He was first team all county and region in his junior season. He had 77 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 4 pass breakups, and 4 interceptions in his junior season. And while those passing stats are pretty impressive, I think he's the strongest in the running game. He's a solid open field tackler, and he's very, very aggressive. I think that's where his strong suit is, and I would look out for him, as well as Tommy Smith, the senior linebacker. He leads the cab in total tackles per game at 10.3 tackles, and he flies around the field. He's a hard hitter. I'd look out for him too.
Offensively for Stevenson, they do have a few things they need to work on. They just have not put up many points at all this year, have really struggled to get things going offensively as we take a look at some of their results. Beat Lithonia 25-0, 13-7 win over Miller Grove, a 15-7 win over Mays, and only a 7-0 win over Arabia Mountain. So Marist put up 33 against Arabia Mountain, whereas they did give up 3. Miller Grove, on the other hand, Stevenson, on the other hand, gave up 0, but only put up 7. So definitely offensively, they've been able to move the ball, just made a lot of mistakes. And against the number 1 team in the state, if you want a chance going into that game to win, I think Stevenson offensively needs to clean some things up and certainly convert whenever they get into Marist side of the field, put up points on the board, and get a lead early, because Marist, if they go down early, you might have a chance. If they get a lead, that defense I feel like, can step up and just hold you all game. JP, for Marist, your keys to the game on Friday, what do you think needs to get better?
I think the main thing for Marist needs to get better is just consistency on offense. We're seeing them really, once they get out of place on drives, it's 3 and out. They need to be able to sustain drives consistently and not just have drives where they go 3 and out and then have a next drive where they're able to drive completely down the field. They didn't have those drives where they're able to flip field position and do things like that, because later, once you get into the playoffs, things like field position are going to become more important in closer games.
Region championships on the line, so certainly some added stakes to this game, some added pressure. And the Marist juniors and seniors will be at the game announced this week, so hopefully some more crowd noise in the stadium, as it was mostly seniors at the home games prior to this week. So a big one in Hughes Spalding, and we'll see how that one turns out. A big consequence of this game is the rankings in the playoffs. The winner takes the 1 seed, loser the 2 seed. And based on the bracket, it's projected that whoever loses this game gets the true blessing of facing Jefferson in the second round of the state playoffs. Something I know that both of these two teams do not want to see happen. They would prefer to see the Dragons in the state title game instead of the second round. So certainly big-time stakes in this one, with Marist and Stevenson set to do battle at 7:30 Friday night. If you can't make it out to the game, all the coverage will be live on the NFHS network. As we take a look at the 4A composite rankings, Marist, Jefferson, Benedictine, Bainbridge, 5-0 for Marist, 6-0 for Jefferson, 6-2 Benedictine, 4-3 Bainbridge. I think those have pretty much been the top 4 all season. But, I mean, there's a couple other teams that are sneaking in there with it. I think gaining hope in terms of being able to compete in 4A, Stevenson at 5, Carver Columbus at 6. I think there's a clear-cut line after that 6th spot. But those 2 teams, 4-0 and 5-0, I think that's where you draw the line and say one of these 6 teams will likely win the state championship this year. At 7, Flowery Branch, 5-2. 8, Cedartown, 5-2. Islands in at 9 at 4-0, and Baldwin 3-0 at 10. Interesting to see if any of those undefeated teams that have played not too many games can creep up into the rankings, win a region championship, and compete. So we take a look at the games of the week in the state of Georgia. Lowndes at Colquitt. I think this has to be your game of the week. Connell, it's number 2 in 7A versus number 3, 6-0 Lowndes, 5-0 Colquitt County. Not much more you can ask for.
Right, and I know I say this every week, but man, I am excited for this matchup. This has been called the game of the year in some cases, as Lowndes and Colquitt County are both crosstown rivals down in Valdosta. That's South Georgia football. It's going to get down on Friday night. Lowndes escaped Tift County 17-13 last week. 17-13. Tift County, if you don't know, they're not a very talented team, not really that good. So for Lowndes to win by that little of a margin it's a little alarming. However, you got to consider that they missed a couple weeks due to COVID-19, and they only practiced 2 days leading up to that game. A guy I would look for on Lowndes is going to be Ja'Curry Brown. He is a dual threat quarterback for Lowndes. He's 4-star, 201 yards passing, 90 yards rushing last week. And Lowndes also has a very strong defense, only giving up 15 points per game. And you look at the other side, Colquitt County, coming off a big win versus Camden County, 34-13 last week. And they also have a dual threat quarterback of their own, Xavier Williams, passed for 140 yards and rushed for 159 with 2 touchdowns. So, man, these are 2 talented teams, both beating Valdosta earlier in the season, which are big wins for them. However, I'm going to go with the tried and true Lowndes. The Vikings, I think, are going to take down Colquitt County, the Packers.
Well, and I think when you look at that result against Tift County, part of that can be blamed due to COVID. They were out on that quarantine. But it was still a concern. I mean, they went
Right.
down early 14-0, I believe, crawled their way back, won that game. But I think that raises some concern. And there is no doubt about it that Colquitt County can compete in 7A this year. Already massive wins. You mentioned the one against Valdosta when they were not favored to win that football game.
Right.
They played a heck of a game coming out and winning this one. This is a tough one to pick. I think this one really just gives you a good preview of the state in 7A. This is a region game. Keep that in mind. So likely determines the region champion. So tons of stakes here at this one. I'm going to have to go Colquitt County. This is at Colquitt down in South Georgia. Lots of fans will be showing up to this one.
There's going to be a lot of fans at that game.
So I'll go with Colquitt County Packers in this game. And I guess you could call it a slight upset.
I'm gonna stick with Lowndes on this one. I picked against them earlier this season. Did not work out well for me. So can't pick against them twice. They let me down, but I'm confident in Lowndes.
For me, I think the big difference was going to be Ja'Cory Brown. He played okay last week. He went 8 of 15 for 201 yards, and then he had 90 yards on the ground. I think he could be even better this week against Colquitt County. I think he was just warming up last week after taking 3 weeks off. I'm going to take Lowndes in this one.
I think it's no doubt going to be a big
awesome
game and a close game. As we take a look at another big game, all 3 games this week are massive games in 7A. This one, Milton and Roswell, another game with region championship implications on the line. Roswell enters 6-0, number 6 in 7A. Milton 5-1, number 9 in 7A. The important part, both teams undefeated in the region. Milton's only loss coming on a 14-7 loss to Cedar Grove, who's like the number 3 team in the whole state of Georgia, out of 3A with some of the most talent you've ever seen. I think this Milton team learned to compete in that game, losing by 7 on the last play where they couldn't score a touchdown from about the 8-yard line. So they certainly had a chance to win that one. Roswell undefeated. They got a huge region win a couple weeks ago over Cherokee. Cherokee, the 3rd team competing in that region. So Roswell maintained their own destiny to win this region, and this one determines it. For Milton, if they win, they would still then have to beat Cherokee to win the region. If they lost that game, it would be all sorts of tiebreakers coming into play, with all 3 of those teams likely with 1 loss in the region. I'm going to have to go with Milton. Milton defensively led by one of the top-ranked sophomores in the whole country, LT Overton, the defensive end. He just creates too much of a pass rush for Roswell to defend against. Plus, when you look at that Milton defense, they've only given up a few points in all their games. I mean, they gave up 20 to Alpharetta, but that's the most. They've held 2 scoreless, only 14, 3, and 18 in their other games. And you look at common opponents. Milton beat Etowah 38-0. Meanwhile, Roswell only won that game 21-14. They've won 2 of their games in overtime, I believe. So I'm going to have to go with Milton in this game.
I'm actually going to go with number 6 Roswell. I stuck with them against that game in Cherokee. That was supposed to be kind of their game to prove they're legit. And they won that game, scoring 35 points on a talented Cherokee defense. I think, undefeated. Like you said, they've played in a lot of close games before. And I think the ability to play in those close games, kind of have that experience, is going to be important, even though Milton did play a good game with Cedar Grove. I'm going to stick with Roswell here. I got to ride with my boys.
I'm going to go with Milton here. 1 loss on the season, and it was to a very good team. So I'm going to stick with Milton.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the closest game of the games that we're going to pick this week, which is saying something because the games we're picking this week are some great games. But I am going to pick Roswell to barely win in this one.
And our final game features the number 1 ranked team in the state of Georgia and the number 1 ranked team in 7A in Grayson. They are 7-0, and they got a huge quarterback transfer that helped them to a just dominating win over Parkview last week. JP, they're taking on Brookwood, 6-1 and unranked, all because of their loss last week. Who do you have?
Last week, Brookwood lost 28-16 to Newton, and Grayson pulled off an impressive 47-7 win over Parkview, Phil Maffa ran for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. And when you look at it, Jake Garcia, he only completed 4 passes, but those 4 passes went for 179 yards and a touchdown. It looks like they're easing him into this offense, but I really don't think Grayson's going to be able to lose this week. I think that they win over Brookwood. I think it could be a 10 to 14 point game.
Well, JP, I think one of the big reasons with that loss to Newton last week for Brookwood was injuries. Dylan Lonergan, their quarterback, who's one of the top 5 passers in the state of Georgia, and I believe it was Marquisette, the wide receiver, who was also injured, and both of those guys will be back this week. With that being said, I'm going to have to stick with Grayson because of how talented of a team they are. I'm not completely sold that the new transfer quarterback Garcia makes too much of an impact on that team because of how much they like to run the ball. I see a shootout here. I see a 42 to 31 win or something like that for Grayson. I do think Brookwood will be able to put up points as they have done all year. Don't be concerned about that one loss. That's just a fluke with injuries. But I think we're going to continue to say this all year. Too much talent on Grayson for them to lose.
Yeah. That's perfect. I agree with everything you just said. Plus, you had the fact they blew out Parkview, they beat Mill Creek, they beat Archer, they beat Collins Hill, who, by the way, blew out North Gwinnett, and they beat McEachern. Those are all the teams that Grayson has beat this year. And man, they just added a USC commit. Golly, that team is ridiculous. So I can't pick against them.
I got 48 to 13. Grayson wins in a blowout.
Okay, that was oddly specific, but another thing to watch for this week. Just want to bring it up regarding high school football, because it was supposed to be one of our featured games last week. Blessed Trinity and Cartersville. They're in a region in which they got their game canceled last week, the two of them. If Cartersville and Blessed Trinity win out in the region, they'll both go undefeated in the region play, assuming Cartersville can beat Calhoun. That's their biggest game. It'll come down to, I believe, average margin of victory in the region to determine the region champ there. So just one thing we wanted to point out in Class 5A. And that's just another thing to watch for just throughout the state of Georgia, these COVID implications on regions because region games could get canceled. So that'll be interesting to watch for. I believe Westminster could find themselves in a similar situation in 3A if they are able to make the playoffs. They do not control their own destiny for making the playoffs currently. So that'll be interesting. But we'll move on to college football now. We update you our standings on high school and college picks currently. I'm in the lead with 45 points, Connell 39, JP 37, and Feeney 32. After a decent week for all of us, I think, last week, as we take a look at our, for sure, biggest game of the week. College Game Day is headed to South Bend, Indiana, for the number 1 ranked Clemson Tigers versus the number 4 ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Feeney?
Yeah, and I think going into the season, it was pretty obvious this was going to be one of the most important games in college football this year. Obviously, Clemson is without Trevor Lawrence, so it takes a hit on how important this game truly is. However, Clemson doesn't, in my opinion, Clemson does not necessarily need Trevor Lawrence to win. Clemson has an elite offense with weapons like Travis Etienne and such an elite wide receiving core. He is a freshman quarterback, DJ Ugalele, but I mean, with all the talent that they have around him, he should be able to win football games. However, Notre Dame's defense is the best they've had since Manti Te'o's squad in 2012. Led by first-round picks Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and Dalen Hayes, the Notre Dame defense is probably one of the best in the nation. They have depth at their front seven, and it's ridiculous. And, Clemson's defense is probably one of the worst they've had in the past couple of years. And now that's not saying they're a bad defense. It's just saying that they're not necessarily the best that they've had.
Inexperienced.
Yes, very inexperienced. Lost a lot of talent to the draft. And Notre Dame's pass offense hasn't been elite either. Ian Book has not looked phenomenal. but their run offense is one of the best in the nation. One of, if not the best offensive lines in the nation, and a really deep running back room. There are a lot of factors that are going into this game, but overall, in my opinion, I predict that Ian Book will step up this week, and I think that Notre Dame will be able to pull this one out in a close one. I say Notre Dame by 1 or 2 touchdowns. What do you think, It's
I don't think I can agree with you on that one. I do think I have to go with Clemson because I think I think they have a better chance to win this game. With that being said, I'm not completely sold. Clemson has not looked very good the past 2 weeks. They've gotten in a big hole, not a big hole. They got in a hole against Syracuse, and Syracuse is not a good football team. So they were easily able to fight their way out of that one. They got into a big hole against Boston College, and Boston College is a good, not great football team. And they were very close to losing that football game. That was a one-score game, and they snuck it out in the end. But I mean, Boston College made some mistakes down the stretch that cost them that game. Clemson didn't win that game in the second half. They played well. Boston College more lost that game.
Absolutely.
If Clemson plays the same way this week, Notre Dame will not lose this football game. Notre Dame is a better team than Boston College and Syracuse. Notre Dame, if they get up early, I think they can hold on. Clemson better come out to play in that first half, or else they're in trouble. But I have Clemson.
I like a lot of what you just said, and especially about Boston College. If we forget about this, but Boston College, if they scored one touchdown in the second half, they win that game. And they didn't score at all. They did not score one time. Going into the half with an 18-point lead, all the momentum, it just all was gone in the second half. And look, I think that's a lot less of the offense and the play by the offense. I think the offense actually played pretty well, other than that one freak turnover between the freshman quarterback DJ and ETN, where it led to a 97-yard return. That was crazy.
No, the offense looked good. I
like the offense.
Uyunglele's numbers looked very good.
I think he played fantastic. He had a great read option. We for a touchdown. I mean,
on
went in
down,
untouched.
Yeah.
He passed the ball great. I mean, some out routes he missed, but he's a freshman. You got to excuse that. But for a lot, I think the play calling was pretty good for a freshman. ETN stepped up. I like the offensive play. I think that was a lot of the defense that led to that big deficit. And so I think Clemson's defense that's going to be the difference in this game. Is can that defense continue? They got to play well. So, but I just can't pick against Clemson. I just still feel like they're going to be able to pull it out.
Yeah, and when you look at how the offense played last week, DJ was pretty close to beating Trevor Lawrence's single game passing record. The offense was playing well, and when you look at what Clemson did bad last week, it was really the first half pass defense, and I don't see Notre Dame being able to exploit that in the way that Boston College was able to do it last week. I don't see Notre Dame being able to do enough to upset Clemson here. I'm going to take Clemson.
Yeah, another big game here. 2 one-loss SEC East teams, likely determining the team that will take the trip to Atlanta in a couple weeks to most likely face off against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Florida and Georgia in Jacksonville. Connell, who do you have?
All right. So in this one, I think I have Georgia in this game, but you know what? I wouldn't say it's a blowout by any means, because I feel like Florida is kind of like a lesser version of Alabama in the fact that they have a dynamic offense and their defense is not the greatest. I think Florida's defense is, that secondary is rough. But the problem is Georgia's quarterback situation has not looked anywhere near good recently, and that's kind of been the problem all year. I mean, only 14 points against Kentucky. They only scored 14 points. Thank God they only gave up 3, because they scored 14. They scored 7 at the beginning of the first half, 7 at the beginning of the second, and then just didn't score for the rest of the halves. But I think, I don't know. I feel like the matchups we're going to have to look at, Georgia's offensive line versus Florida's defensive line. I think Georgia's offensive line has played well. That rushing attack's pretty strong. On defense, Georgia, a lot of people say they got to stop Kyle Pitts, but look, I think they cannot forget about Kadarius Toney. If you put all your resources into stopping Kyle Pitts, you're going to leave Kadarius Toney wide open, and you do not want to do that because that man is a playmaker. I think Georgia's going to execute better than Florida will. I think they're just a more polished team, even though on offense they're weak. So I got Georgia.
Tough one to pick here. I mean, it's just everything's pointing you towards Florida, honestly. One loss to Texas A&M, which honestly doesn't look too bad right now. And then Georgia just has not looked like themselves the past couple of weeks. But, big but, Florida just never performs in this football game, first of all. Second of all, Florida doesn't have a good defense. And it's not been a Georgia defense issue. It's been a Georgia offensive issue. And if anything can help them get things going, it's probably the Florida defense. I want to take Florida. All things are pointing me towards taking Florida. It's just the fact that Florida doesn't ever win this football game, so I have to go with the Georgia Bulldogs. But I would not be surprised if you see JT Daniels in this football game. And if you don't see JT Daniels in this football game, I'm not sure you're going to see him for the rest of the season. And I don't think Georgia has a chance of making the college football playoff.
This is a really tough game because honestly, both teams are very solid all around and each have like one tragic flaw, like one flaw. For Georgia, it's the running back position. I mean, quarterback position, not running back. My bad.
It will never be the running back position in Georgia.
For Florida, it's the defensive back position. It's really hard for me to pick against Georgia because that defense is really good. It's top 3 in the nation. But I mean, it's just that quarterback is such an important position, and offense is still so important in college football. And when you can only put up 14 points against Kentucky, I don't know. I just think Florida's defensive line is going to be enough to hold the Georgia run game in check enough to where Georgia will have to pass the ball. So I think, and Stetson Bennett will make some mistakes. I think I want to pick Florida. I want Florida to win this game, and I think they want it more.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Georgia on this one. I think really Georgia's just waiting for Brock Vandegrift to get there.
He couldn't get on campus soon enough.
I don't think Georgia has really too much of a playoff shot as far as getting far in the playoffs this year or even maybe getting into the playoffs this year. We'll see how things go there. But I do think that they will barely win over Florida. I think for Georgia to win, though, they do have to keep Florida under 30 points.
Something tells me that someone named Kirby Smart in Athens, Georgia, is really wishing he had a guy named Justin Fields on his roster right now. Yeah. I think there's some serious regret on that decision.
I mean, it's a lot of system, too. He wasn't really in that system.
It's a system thing.
People say that.
But there's no doubt you would rather have Justin Fields
oh
than Stetson Bennett.
Yeah.
It's like
so
I think that Justin Fields would perform better in this situation than
Justin
Fields. Say about 99.9%
and Justin Fields
of the time.
did not leave because of the system. He left because he just didn't get his chance over Jake
He
Fromm.
got benched to Jake Fromm.
Yeah, and he was better than Jake Fromm, and there's no doubt about that.
He was definitely better than Jake
Our
Fromm.
last game here, Michigan and Indiana, very interesting one. Michigan coming off a loss to Michigan State. What happened there after the big win over Minnesota? Well, what we thought to be a big win doesn't seem like a big win anymore. Feeney, Indiana comes in with 2 big wins to start the year. Who do you have?
You know, as I said last week, I really hate Michigan. It has been a rough week for Michigan fans too. I mean, they came into last week's game against Michigan State a 25-point favorite. They did not put up 25 points. That's just sad. That's all that is. Indiana came to play this season. Indiana, like they deserve to win this football game. Michigan does not. I think that we might be seeing the last of Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. I think Indiana is on the up. They remind me a lot of Utah last year. That's the best comparison I have. They have a very experienced team. They've 2 big wins so far. I think they keep it rolling with 3.
Wow. This is a tough one for me to pick. I think I have to go with Indy. No, I'll change that. I'm going to go Michigan. Jim Harbaugh is on the hot seat once again. I think he's going to be like Gus Malzahn. You get on the hot seat. Oh, let's get a big win over a ranked team, and then you'll be off the hot seat for a year. Now, I don't think that'll permanently get him off the hot seat because he has to beat Ohio State at some point for him to keep his job in the next 2 years, I think. He has to beat Ohio State. And I think the future is somewhat bright with Milton at quarterback. He just needs to get more experience, and I think this Michigan team could be good in the near future. And I think they pick up this win over Indiana, essentially crushing Indiana's hopes because they still have to play Ohio State.
Right. I am also going to go with Michigan here. That loss versus Michigan State, a lot of it was due to the great pass coverage Michigan State had on Michigan. I think the offense in the first game against Minnesota revolved a lot around the RPO and quick slants, stuff like that. Guys that had space, separation for Joe Milton to throw to. He had 90% of his completions on RPOs. And against Michigan State, they did a great job of locking that down. I don't think Indiana they don't have as good of a secondary or pass coverage as Michigan State. So I think this will be kind of a comeback game for Joe Milton here. And I think Michigan's going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, I like Indiana because I think they're a team on the rise, and I hate Michigan, but I'm still going to take Michigan just because I think Michigan State came in with the perfect game plan against Michigan, and I don't see them losing 2 big games in a row.
All right, real quick upset picks, 3 points on the line here. I'm going to take one tonight in Northern Illinois over Buffalo. Both teams have not played a game yet. Northern Illinois beat Buffalo by 1 point last year, and they are 14.5-point underdogs. I think the big factor in this one is not having played a game for either team, so you don't really know what to expect. And I think Northern Illinois comes out ready to play and gets a big win tonight.
I am going to go with NC State over Miami. I mean, I looked at all the upset picks possible for this week, and I was like, okay, I think NC State has probably got the best chance to beat Miami over any other game that was left. So, I mean, that's all I got for that one.
You sound real confident in that one, Paul. I'm gonna go. I really like my Sun Devils and Jaden Daniels. I'm gonna go with Arizona State over USC.
I like that pick a lot.
Yeah, JP.
Well, I'm going to go Arizona over Utah. It's 2 unranked teams that haven't played a game yet. I think Arizona can pull this one out. I think Utah's lost a lot coming from last year to this year.
3 upset picks with 2 teams that have not played a game yet. I think that spells somebody getting it right this week, I hope. Real quick, let's have a quick debate on who we think the number 4 team in the playoffs will be at the end of the year. Connell, start us off. Who's your team in at number 4? Because I think right now we can all agree that we have. Can we all agree Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama are 3 close to locks right now?
Yep. My number 4 team, and this goes against a lot of what I think. I'm not a huge fan of the Pac-12, but I'm gonna go with Oregon here. And it's an interesting pick, but I look at the other 2 most likely options, and not in the Power 5, and I'd say Notre Dame and UGA, and I just don't see Notre Dame beating Clemson either time, and I don't see UGA beating Alabama in the SEC championship if they get there. They have to go through Florida and then beat Alabama in the SEC championship. I don't see that happening for UGA, and then Notre Dame, I just don't think they can beat Clemson. So I'm going to go with the best team in the Pac-12, which is the remaining Power 5. Big 12's they're out of the question. So I think the Pac-12, I'm going to go with Oregon there. I think they're the best chance to get number 4.
Yeah, I like that pick. Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, I would have said Wisconsin prior to today. Unfortunately, they have those COVID issues. And I think that's just unfortunate for them. They had to cancel their game against Purdue, and so I'm going to take the Purdue Boilermakers. I think that team is better than everybody thinks. They got 2 big wins already on the season, beating Illinois and Iowa. And I know that's not crazy wins.
Big win over
They
Illinois.
won both those games without Rondale Moore, who is half of their offense. And they won them both without their head coach, Jeff Brom. Both, I believe, due to COVID-19. And the rest of their schedule, obviously, Wisconsin got canceled. Northwestern, Minnesota, Rutgers, Nebraska, Indiana. 4 out of the 5 of those games, you have to favor them in right this instant. If they can beat Indiana, they're in the Big Ten championship game. Then it's 1 game to make the playoffs. And remember last time Purdue played Ohio State?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. let's see if that can happen again.
I'm going to go with Notre Dame. I think we can all agree that the Big 12's out. Like, there's just no reason for them
Yeah.
to be in the playoffs. They don't belong there. And I think even if Cincinnati goes like 11-0 with their with the conference championship over Memphis, woohoo! Like, I genuinely don't think I think Notre Dame will beat Clemson at least once. I'm confident in saying that. And I don't see how you can put in, and I think UGA will lose at least once more this season. So I don't understand how you could put in an 11-0 Cincinnati over a 10-1 Notre Dame. So I think Notre Dame pulls it out and gets the number 4 spot.
Well, Andrew, I reject your claim. I'm taking Cincinnati for that 4th spot.
Okay.
When you look at how they played, they have one. I'm going to just say they have the best secondary in college football right now. When you look at how they played versus SMU, giving up 13 points to that SMU offense, versus Memphis, giving up only 10 points to that Memphis offense. These are great offenses, and they're really shutting them down. The Cincinnati defense has played great. And I think when you look at Desmond Ridder, he's really been the main question mark. He's really stepped up his play the past 2 weeks. They scored 42 and 49. He has 994 passing yards on the season. He stepped up in the run game as well. And I think I like Cincinnati for that 4th spot.
Unfortunately, I think Cincinnati's going to be in the situation that what UCF was in 3 years ago, where everybody declares them national champions, but they weren't that good. But whatever.
I think the
All right.
path for them is if Notre Dame loses twice and UGA loses twice.
One thing though, when Desmond Howard came out at the beginning of the season at Cincinnati in his playoff, we all thought he was nuts. But
yeah,
man, he's got a little bit of an argument here. They
Yeah,
haven't
he
lost.
does.
a game.
Well,
He does.
problem for Desmond Howard is that he actually changed
Yeah,
that
he goes
pick before the
yeah,
season
but
started.
what I'm saying is
So-
initially when he threw that thing out there, everyone was like, "Oh my God, what is that?"
He
All
could be
right.
looking a little smarter if he
A
hadn't
little bit
changed it.
smarter.
That
A little bit
Bearcats
smarter.
defense.
One more team to take an eye on. Well, 2 more would be USC and BYU. I think USC is in a similar spot with Oregon, where if they can win that Pac-12, I think if one team can go 7-0 in the Pac-12, that gives them a good shot at getting in. BYU, Cincinnati, both. I mean, if
I don't
both
think
the,
BYU has
it-
the
the
strength
thing
schedule,
is,
though.
well, BYU
Cincinnati does
BYU
though.
More
Cin-
than
Cincinnati
BYU
has
the
a
strength.
more than
massive
BYU.
BYU has a massive game against Boise State this week. Ranked teams. That's a huge game. If BYU goes undefeated, then that'll be fascinating. If we get into a Cincinnati versus BYU conversation for the playoff, will be very interesting. But plenty of scenarios to play out in the coming weeks. Most importantly is the region championship taking place this week between Marist and Stevenson in Hughes Spalding Stadium. As we said, 7:30, NFHS Network. If you can't make it out, make sure to tune in. But that's going to do it for this week on the MBC Sports Podcast. Signing off for Andrew Feeney, Connell Scruggs, and JP Eisenhower. My name's Andrew Selliver. Have a great rest of your week, everybody, and go War Eagles.